Welcome to This Week in Coworking, where industry leaders get succinct, actionable insights.
Hey everybody, welcome back to This Week in Coworking, the audio and video version. I'm Hector Kolonas, one of the co-hosts here on the show. And today I am joined by the amazing Sarah Travers. Sarah, how are you?
I am doing so well. Thank you, Hector. It's wonderful to be on your podcast.
It's fantastic to have you here. We were just saying before the show that we've crossed paths so many times within the co-working world. We've never actually sat down and had a chat about all the amazing things that you're doing at WorkBar. So let's dig right into, for folks who don't know, you've got a bit of a background in this industry. You worked a small stint at IWG, a bit of work at within PropTech, and then had a rocket ship trajectory through the WorkBar organization. Let's start with IWG. Tell me a little bit about how long you were there and what you were doing at IWG.
Yeah, so I have spent all of my professional career in the co-working industry. I started with IWG back in 2001, right after I graduated from college, and spent about 15 years with IWG. But this was the IWG of what I like to refer to, and I know some of my colleagues who were there at the same time as the Wild West of IWG, when it was pre-acquisition of HQ Global. It was pre sort of North American headquarters. It was back when they were a real British European company. I'm in Boston, WorkBar is in Boston, and I believe at the time back in 2001, IWG maybe had 2 locations in Boston. And now I think they're at like 40 or 50. They keep adding so many every year. So this was back when IWG was really relatively small, and the concept in general was relatively unknown. So I spent about 15 years with IWG. My husband didn't work for IWG, but he worked for a company that had space at IWG. So that's how I met my husband. That's where I had my babies. I spent a lot of very good years there. And then in about 2016, I left IWG to go work for a PropTech startup out of New York called WorkFrame. And WorkFrame was acquired by Newmark, I think maybe 6 or 9 months after I went over to them and started their Boston office. So I was back out in the job market shortly after joining WorkFrame. And then I went over to WorkBar, and I've been at WorkBar since 2017. I started as their head of sales. Anybody who knows me knows that sales is my love language. I love sales. And within 6 months of joining WorkBar, I became their CEO. So I've been the CEO of WorkBar since about 2017 at this point.
Just amazing. Like, I love speaking to folks who have been in this before the whole, is co-working WeWork thing.
Right.
Seeing the trajectory ahead of that. I go in kind of 2013. It was just before that whole chaos, let's call it that. IWG's also had their own versions of that. But with regards to your move to WorkBar, I believe that was an experience at the PropTech company that actually instilled a lot of the strategy you brought to WorkBar. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I totally can. So it's so funny. A quick story about when I was at IWG that you just triggered my brain to think about. I worked at an IWG that was very close to the first WeWork that opened up in Boston. And this was probably in 2009, 2010. And our head of business development at the time popped into my office and said, "Hey, do you have a few minutes?" And I was like, "Yeah, come on in." And he said, "No, there's this new co-working space down the street called WeWork. Let's go hang out there and have our meeting." He said, "So much cooler than this. It's got beer on tap. And I was like, "Close the door. You can't exactly come into IWG or Regis at the time and say, let's go have a meeting at WeWork because it's so much cooler." So when I joined WorkFrame after leaving IWG, I left IWG because I had young kids that I was dropping off at daycare every day. And I just wanted the startup scene in Boston it still is so cool and so fun. But back then Mass Challenge was spinning out really cool companies. There was such an ecosystem that you felt no matter what industry you were in Boston. And I just had this sense that if I was going to leave my kids at daycare every day, if I was really going to commit myself to a career, I really wanted to join a startup company, join a company that I thought was doing fresh, innovative things that would really, I hate the word disrupt, but really disrupt the world. And I wanted to be part of that. So that's why I ripped the Band-Aid off, left IWG. But what ended up happening was this company was based in New York City. I was opening their Boston office. So I went to New York and then they sent me to Boston and put me in a office at WeWork by myself, separated from the rest of the company in this sort of glass office where I didn't really know anybody. It felt very exclusive to me. I didn't even like leaving my little office to go get water. I just felt excluded because at that time in this WeWork building, a huge portion of it was dedicated to Amazon, another huge portion to Liberty Mutual, these huge, massive companies that all those colleagues work with one another. There was no open common space where people would hang out and get to know one another and have any social connections. Everybody who worked for these large companies within the WeWork spaces, they all knew each other. They hung out together. So it was very exclusive. I'm not saying it's about WeWork in general. I know lots of people have really great experiences there. And I think WeWork really legitimized our entire industry well before IWG did. But it was really lonely. It was really soul crushing for me. I had a terrible experience. And that really impacted my tenure and how I think about the job that I was doing back when I was with that company. And so, to your point, Hector, it really did impact when I came to WorkBar, how I felt about WorkBar and how I felt about the differentiators that WorkBar had over WeWork, over IWG, over Industrious, and how our model is just completely different. I think there's a world where we need to start categorizing co-working operations from one another because we are not one size fits all. We are totally different from one another. WorkBar is in the industry. Obviously, we're in this co-working industry, but we're a totally different product than the big three that are out there right now. And I have felt like it's been my calling for actually only in the past 12 to 8 months, really, to get out there and start telling people how different we're doing it from other people and why it works and why I think it's not only the model for the future, but the model for today.
I love that. And I'm so happy that you started sharing that story and that we get to amplify that. But I'm also so grateful that you're spending some time with us today to really dig into the whys and whats and hows, as opposed to just sharing online, which it's great to read, but it's always good to hear and put faces to the brands as well. Thank you very much for being here. So the one thing that you triggered a memory for me as well from my IWG days when I was a member there, I also joined a space in Manchester, in the UK, with this idea that there's going to be an ecosystem of companies, and I joined and I was the only person on an entire floor. So it was a hot desk membership, and I was like, this is a rubbish industry. I was oversold. I landed moving to a private office because I just felt ridiculous to be in a 100-person office by myself. And then my life took another turn, my business going through a bunch of crashes through the Cyprus and Spanish markets. And I ended up building makeshift co-working spaces and ad agencies. And I was like, oh no, this is co-working. That was the idea. This is the execution. And so I'm so happy that happened because I got to see that difference. And that, as you're saying now, we're getting to a maturity point in the ecosystem where there is different flavors or different types of products that can be stacked or used in a kind of ecosystem of work where you may pop into a WorkBar in the morning, but you have your team offsite in an Industrious or something like that. And we're seeing this kind of become more and more popular. But for folks who maybe haven't heard enough from you, and we all have not heard enough from you, firstly. Second, for people who haven't, what is WorkBar doing so differently?
A couple of the core highlights of our model is we've built a regional model with scale. We focused on growth. We focused on margin. WorkBar's been around since 2009. So circa the same year that WeWork moved out into the market. Our physical layout is really unique. 50% of our layout is open space that is activity-based co-working neighborhoods. From a landlord perspective, it's a cost-effective and reusable build-out. But from a member perspective, it gives our members a lot of optionality and it supports the functionality of a really mobile, flexible workforce. So I always say that I like to see members in a given location 40 hours a month, not 40 hours a week. I don't think anybody should be working out of a single space 40 hours a week. I think that There's a lot of nuance and dynamic that should happen. And I don't think it's healthy for people to work out of the same space all the time. I don't think you get a lot out of that. But operationally, we consider ourselves best in class. We're a really strong brand in co-working. We're the strongest brand in co-working in at least the Boston market. And we've been able to scale while maintaining our vibe. What's always fun is that people assume that we're a startup company. We're not. We've been around a really long time. We're a successful company, but we still have that sort of startup vibe. And I think that culture goes back to our roots. Our roots are based in Boston, which is, I don't even think it's arguably, it is the most innovative city in the entire world. We've produced the most world life-changing innovations that have happened since the Revolutionary War. And we were in this book back a decade ago called Built in Boston as one of the top 5 reasons that Boston has become one of the most, or has been the most innovative city in the world. And one of those reasons is proximity to talent, proximity to funding, proximity to ideas. Obviously, we have a lot of really world-class educational institutions in the city of Boston, but proximity and giving the people who have access to all of that and who are those people a place to come, connect, share ideas, feed off one another's energies, collaborate, and inspire one another. So our space is the hotbed to do that in, and it always has been. The open spaces is what makes our model really unique, and that coupled with the regional density, we have open reciprocity between all of our locations. So our members can go into Boston one day, Cambridge another day, out to Burlington, Nita. They have access to all of our locations anytime they want to have access to our locations. And we've seen that they like that. We've seen that just by tracking presence data that they go to more than one location a week, a lot of them a day. And so our model supports that because it's primarily open. When I think about some of the competitors saying for an extra $100, you can tack on a membership that gives you reciprocity at a certain amount of other locations. What does that reciprocity actually give somebody? A hard chair in a cafe at a harvest table? To me, that's not super functional. The access that they get at a WorkBar is they can come in and be productive. Our open spaces are made to be productive for 8 hours a day. The chairs are all really high quality. The spaces are really dynamic. There's a place for anybody to be able to come in and work. I run my company from a WorkBar. I don't have a private office. We all co-work. And I can say that I successfully run our business from a co-working space. And on that side, we also sit elbow to elbow with all of our members. So I'm not sitting in a glass tower trying to think of ways to make my workforce or the people that I encourage to come into our space. I'm not sitting somewhere else thinking, wow, if I add a dog washing station, if I add a nail salon, if I had this, then people will want to come to work. I think that is like such a terrible way to spend someone's time, is thinking about ways to escape from work when you're actually at work. I recently said to one of my colleagues at WorkBar, we're in a loneliness epidemic. We're not in like a dirty dog epidemic. Wash your dog at home. Let's not get distracted by these like shiny perks that companies are throwing at us. Actually get a workspace where people want to go and they will want to go and do good work. End of story. I get a little passionate about it because I do think that WorkBar is the place where people can go. And I also think WorkBar's for everybody. I've yet to find anybody who can't work out of our spaces. So to sum it up, Hector, you asked me why WorkBar is different. That is why WorkBar is different.
I love that. And I love that you're so passionate. It is really energizing to me as someone who gets to tell the stories in this job as part of lifting up and showing the different examples of how co-working works, as opposed to how co-working is marketed at working. So be as passionate as you want, especially on this feed, anytime you want. But you brought up some pretty interesting points there. You did mention the word landlord, which is obviously a big trend under the whole industry now. Someone has to own the buildings that these amazing spaces and communities and life-changing community, like ecosystems exist in. What is WorkBar's relationship with landlords? Are you renting on long-term leases? Are you doing management agreements? What is the landlord strategy?
We have a diverse range of agreements that we have with landlords, from full leases to profit share leases to full on management agreements. I would say we've done more management agreements than we have leases in the past 2 to 3 years. And we've had to turn away a lot of landlords as well who want to put work bars in because we don't want to cannibalize some of our other locations in greater Boston. But I think what we're looking at right now, I was actually out to dinner last week in New York with a Brookfield executive who runs their turnkey concept, and they're putting tenant ready spaces in a lot of their assets. They're furnished, they're move-in ready. And I think the evolution of combining this turnkey approach with the programming and culture of co-working spaces to transform buildings into those thriving ecosystems, that's what we're seeing right now. And ultimately, it is delivering an authentic product to the actual humans that use the space, which I think is the end goal for all of us. I also, because I've been in this industry so long, landlords are now seeing co-working spaces as assets to show off when they're walking tenants in the market through their buildings. I think that now, if I look at one of our landlords, if I look at a building website and WorkBar's in that building, WorkBar is front and center as a tenant and an amenity in that building. That is new. That is not something that was happening 5 years ago. We've never been a passive tenant, obviously, in any building. We bring a lot of activity to buildings, but I had yet until probably the past couple of years seen landlords grab onto WorkBar so tightly and showcase us. Whereas before they might walk through our space to say, look at how beautiful this space is. You could replicate that in the building as well. Now they're saying not only is WorkBar space beautiful, but it's also an amenity to this entire building that you can use for event space. You can get memberships to. It's so active. Look at all the people going in and out of it. So we have a different relationship today with our landlords than we did 5 years ago. Also, going through the pandemic, no matter what type of an arrangement you have, what type of deal, you're always partners with the landlord. Because even on our lease terms during COVID, I would have to call up one of our landlords and say, we need help, or can we work together? How can we all survive this? No matter what type of deal you have, whether it's a full management, whether it's a profit share, you have a really good relationship with that landlord. WorkBar is very lucky to have good relationships with all of our landlords. And I think that there is a give and take with all of them. But right now, we have more management agreements today than leases, but we have a nice diverse mix, which is exactly what we like.
What's lovely. And it does bring up a second question, but before I get to that, with regards to the management agreements, like this is a trend that we've been watching through the newsletter over the last year and a half, this increase in landlords wanting to do management agreements.
Yeah.
And a lot of operators actually starting to feel a bit of a risk to that, in the fact that you're fully fitting out a space, you're showing them how to do it.
Totally.
And then a lot of landlords are now launching their own brands. They're launching their own internal flex offerings. I know that WorkBar is a little bit different because of the fact that you've got that history, that brand, that you don't look that worried. But is it something that is starting to, like, whispers is starting to bounce around in your head that, hey, we're training people,
right,
the landlords, how to do this?
I'll tell you, we've lived through that before. WorkBar had a partnership with Staples, and WorkBar actually had co-working locations in the back of Staples back in 15 to 17. And private equity bought Staples and said, we think we can do this. We don't need to pay WorkBar to do this. So after as friendly a lawsuit as a lawsuit can get, we separated from Staples. They took everything we taught them over 2 years and tried to run co-working without WorkBar. It hasn't really succeeded. It hasn't taken off beyond the locations that are opened for them. And I think that if you differentiate your product enough, and if you are operationally best in class, anybody that you're not teaching this. If that were the argument to make, why wouldn't landlords just go off and open flex themselves if you provided no value? So the co-working operators that are scared that they're going to teach something to somebody and then they're going to exit out of the space and have the landlord successfully operate co-working, then they're doing something wrong. They're not providing the value that they should provide to earn the management fee or whatever they're making on the deal. So I'm not that worried about it because it's happened to me before with a very large company. And I did learn from that, but ultimately Staples was not able to effectively run co-working out of their locations and grow to the point where they thought they would. And I think that we can all say as an industry the co-working operators out there bring value to the assets. And so I feel strongly enough that WorkBar has a barrier to entry that I'm not worried that somebody can come and do what I do. It's just that's not something I worry about at all, to be honest.
I love that. It's fantastic to hear that is not only something that's happened, but something that has made your business better. I remember the
Right.
Staples deal. I remember seeing how it all went south, but I'm glad to see that it's also just done good for WorkBar as a brand. I'm pretty sure that you never let that happen again.
Not going to let that one happen. I'll also say sometimes deals aren't good for your company because that took so much out of our small company that we weren't able to focus on what made WorkBar. And so at the end, it was actually good for both of us that we got out of it.
Yep.
So WorkBar could be WorkBar.
I love that. One of the things that makes WorkBar WorkBar is your dedication to supporting local businesses.
Yeah.
I think it's what, 2030. When did you start your grant program?
So WorkBar, we introduced our small business grant, I believe back in 2021 during the pandemic. And thank you for bringing that up. But WorkBar feels a very strong connection, obviously, to Boston. It's in our roots. It's who we are. No matter what type of expansion we do in the future, we'll always be a Boston-based company. And so we feel very connected to the city that made us and that supports us. So during the pandemic, we obviously did not have a ton of cash to donate to other people, but we thought it was really important create this grant to support the small businesses in Boston that needed support. And what I like, and so now we're doing it, this is our 4th year in a row doing it. What I like the most about it is obviously the money is great for the company that gets it, but it is the fact that they get a free year of co-working space for their entire team that makes it really awesome because we're giving them the gift of coming into our spaces where who knows who you're going to bump and connect with. And whether that sparks innovation, whether that sparks a conversation that leads to a round of funding, local demand, global demand, all of that exists within the ecosystems in our spaces. And I think that's where companies can get the most out of their days at WorkBar. So that's what makes me really excited about it. But no, we're doing it. Thank you for bringing it up. And we're doing it. This is our 4th year in a row doing it.
I love that. And I also love the fact that it's not just the grant, but the gift of co-working. This is like an idea that's been
Yeah.
at the back of my head for years. When we first built Syncaroo in 2021, we're like, why aren't spaces creating gift cards for co-working? Why aren't you giving
Yeah.
away as a member? I know people who would benefit so much from the value of co-working. I just force them to come and work here. But if
Yeah.
Christmas time or Mother's Day or Entrepreneurial Day or any of those days, I give them a little, hey, I value what you do, but I think this is a cool gift for you to go use the same way as you'd give a Target gift card or something like that. And then they go use it to learn and feel co-working. That's going to be something I have to come back to because that is, I don't know if that's something you guys are.
So we do that.
Cool, yeah.
Yeah. So we do that. We open gift cards up on Black Friday through the end of the holiday season. And that's exactly it. It's not even just a message of, I think you would value this. I think that you could add a lot of like productivity to your day. It's also, I want to work with you. I want to sit elbow to elbow with you and potentially have lunch with you. And I think of it as a lot more than just, I think you'll really get a lot of value out of that day. I like you so much. I not only want to see you, whether it's socially or whomever it is that you're giving that to, it's I want to see you at work when I go to work. And I think that message is really impactful because we always say you can have a bring your friend to work day. But what's more impactful is I think that gift of I do want to see you. I think that you could have a positive impact on my day by coming into the space.
That is fantastic. So I've got a bit of homework for you, Sarah, after this call.
Uh-oh.
Send me what you've got planned for this. I know we're coming up to Black Friday pretty close. I would love to have a look at that. I would love to, if you don't
Yeah.
mind, inspire other spaces using
I
that
would love to.
just to see the messaging because you've done this before.
Yeah.
There's something missing there. I think a lot of operators, especially in suburban markets or in markets like yours, could benefit from that, just like activating that referral network in a way that isn't just, hey, I'll give you 10% off your desk if you bring a member. So I think there's something there.
Right.
So I would love, if you don't mind, taking that and resharing it with the rest of the community who do read these newsletters
Yes.
or listen to these podcasts, that'll be fantastic.
Absolutely. Yeah. We have such a great marketing team at WorkBar that knows like the brand voice, that is as protective of the WorkBar brand as I am, and can speak the language as well as I can speak the language. And it makes all the difference in the world. And I think that's part of any co-working operator's differentiator. It's going to be their brand voice and who they are, and changing the messaging as not just the 10% off, but hey, I value you so much as a friend. Like, come hang out with me at work. Like, we don't have to sit together all day, but like we could grab lunch together.
Love that. I'm definitely going to reshare it. So it actually brings up another thing, and I'm so happy you brought up your marketing team, because you were also in the newsletter a couple of months ago for having an award-winning video. And I love sharing
Yeah.
co-working videos. I love it when we take the things that we all know and we put it in a shareable medium that people can engage with.
Yeah.
Are we going to see more such videos out of the WorkBar working
Yeah.
team?
Yeah, that was such a wonderful experience. And we have such a talented team here. And it was such a labor of love. It's actually won a couple of awards. And the messaging is still relevant today as it was a year ago, which I think is really important as well. What we've done this year is we really focused on building an asset library. So we do a lot of case studies. We have a podcast that's not about the co working industry, but more about Boston companies and giving them a platform to share their stories. What's most interesting that's come out of that is that we'll be talking to a entrepreneur who has launched more than one or two companies, and they'll say, I did my first pitch at WorkBar Cambridge back in 2015. And I'm like, it all comes back to WorkBar. WorkBar is essential glue. But obviously that's not the case. But there are so many connections like that out in the universe that exists when you have a regional co-working brand, and when you encourage the type of productive behavior that happens within our locations. You can get so much out of it. But we were just doing a case study a couple of weeks ago, and I was watching it before our marketing team put it out into the world, and they had put a line in the as a header on sharing the video. But when I watched the video, the member said, WorkBar is just more than a desk. It's a community, it's all this other stuff. And I was like, why are you using that line? That just speaks like volumes to me. But if so, we do the case studies, we do our podcast. And the reasons we do all of this is so we have all of this sort of digestible content that we can splice up and send out over different mediums that talk to different audiences. But really, as you and I have spoken about, Hector, we've really spent the past year trying to say, okay, everybody in Boston knows who we are, and we're very good at differentiating ourselves that way. But how do we really start getting the message out about why WorkBar is so special and why it's so different than our competitors? And not just our competitors, but different than your traditional office, different than Starbucks, different than your home. Like, why do you want to come into WorkBar to work? This is why. It's really clear. It's really simple. It's really value driven.
Love that. And I do love the fact you're also doing that podcast that's not necessarily pitching co-working, but pitching that co-working is part of this story. And we're seeing this
Yes.
we're seeing it from Cohatch, we're seeing it from yourselves, we're seeing it from a few other regional operators, really highlighting the success of their members as the success of their space. And I'm really loving that
That's all we have.
industry, because it's really shifting away from the New York famous brand of let's bang our chests and do tequila shots, and more about
Yeah.
who actually succeeded from within this space. Because we have seen in the newsletter a couple of times over the last few months this backslapping of co-working, saying the CEO of OpenAI saying co-working spaces are not good for productivity. They're not good for
Yeah.
innovative companies who really want to succeed. And I'm like, yeah, but not everyone wants to build that $1 trillion rocket ship. And if they do, it still plays a part into that, I believe. But there are also everyone else. The whole world is run by small and medium businesses. And the more we can do to celebrate their successes and their growth is just, I think it's something we all have to do a lot better. So I'm so happy to see folks like you do podcasting and do videos and share that. So thanks for celebrating.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think that it's so funny. We just had yesterday, we signed a global technology leader that has like $40 billion in revenue a year into one of our suburban co-working spaces, who's going to keep a footprint in Greater Boston, just a lot smaller, and send 60 to 80 of their employees over to WorkBar every single day. No diss to Sam Altman and OpenAI and all that kind of good stuff. Obviously, he's revolutionizing the world and doing awesome things. But so I don't think you can make a blanket statement saying that you can't be productive and drive value in a co-working space. Also, that comes back to my categorizing different co-working companies for different things. I think that there are lots of success stories coming out of WorkBar's co-working space. And I'm sure there are lots of success stories coming out of a lot of co-working spaces. I only know about ours, and I could write a book on them. And actually, it's funny. In one of my podcasts, we interviewed Scott Kirshner, who is the innovative reporter for the Boston Globe. And he was talking about, we were sitting near North Station in downtown Boston, and he's a couple of blocks from here. Edison invented the first phone, and it was basically the first iteration of a co-working space. And Alexander Graham Bell was also in the space, and the two of them like worked together. And I'm like, wait a second. So you're saying the phone, A, the first co-working space in the world was in Boston, and B, the phone was invented in a co-working space. And he's like, you can take that spin. He's like, you could provide like a serious argument that is factual. And I was like, it came out of my mouth. That means it's factual. And now that is the story out there. But I think that over time, especially in a city as old as Boston, obviously not as old as my European friends out there, but you will find a lot of those types of stories. And who knows if we would all be talking on tin cans right now if it wasn't for co-working spaces.
That's amazing. I want to read that book as well. Definitely, in all that free time that you have, get to writing it.
I'm sending you all of the book.
So much free time.
So much free time, Hector.
I love that. So you have hinted at something throughout this call, and I want to like drag it out into the open. Where next for WorkBar? Is it? I know Boston is. You will always be a Boston-based company, but
yep.
Is there any inclination plans for 2025 to see WorkBar in New York, in San Francisco, anywhere else?
Yeah, I always say world domination is our goal, but WorkBar has done really well because we have grown really responsibly. We have focused on margins since day one. We are proud to be like a profitable co-working company. We are a business. We have owners that like us to be profitable and like us to be a responsible growing company. We have a few more locations that we're going to open in Boston in 2025, and we are looking at options right now to grow outside of Boston. We do like the idea of having this regional model though. So it wouldn't just be opening up a location in New York, opening up a location in Austin, Texas. It would be opening up a bunch of locations to provide the member reciprocity and the open floor plan and all that kind of stuff. What I would like to see in the future is what everybody else likes as well, is consolidation of the industry. I think my model pairs very well with the models out there that have focused on urban saturation, because I consider us to be a very good partner. And we've done that with a landlord here in Boston. We've partnered with Synergy, who has a lot of buildings in downtown Boston. And we have taken their turnkey spaces into our portfolio just because we're that lead generation machine. Mm-hmm. And we've combined the turnkey assets they have with access to all of our suburban locations. And it's really, that is the winning product, right? That is the winning product where the employees get access to all of this. They have the downtown HQ, but then they also have a regional network of co-working spaces. So I'd like to see a little consolidation. I'd like to see a partnership with a landlord that has urban. They have the downtown HQ. I think that is the winning model, is the ecosystem of creating turnkey spaces with co-working. You add that activation, you add the reciprocity, and that is like the model that you cannot beat.
Love that. And yeah, there's just so many moves being made right now. Obviously, I get to sit front and center and see what everyone's working on. So it's fantastic to see.
Hook me up, Hector.
If you are listening and you are looking for a landlord, a co-working space, Sarah, how can we get hold of you? before we finish.
Oh, everybody knows how to call me.
There you
I'm an
go.
open book. They can, yeah, everybody knows how to get in touch with me. But no, and I want everybody to come visit us at WorkBar and see what we're doing.
I was going to say they can just walk into any work bar and just shout Sarah loud enough, you'll hear.
Honestly,
I hope that's how it works.
Yeah. Look, I had to book one of our podcast rooms. We have podcast rooms at our locations for this. Otherwise, I would be sitting out in our teams here today. So I sit out in our Commons neighborhood because that's a team collaboration neighborhood. But just like all of our members, I have to book a room, make sure the technology is working, make sure that I can understand how to set myself up. I think that's really important that the leaders do that kind of stuff. So you know where the pain points are at every location and you can fix them.
I love that. And I want to finish off, Sarah, with one kind of question or point of advice. There's so many people from other hospitality industries or just out of college coming into co-working right now. It is essentially a global movement. For folks who are coming in now and they're doing a lot of the community manager, oftentimes a lot of tedious digital grunt work, what advice would you give them if they're more aspirational and they're considering maybe leaving the industry because they can't move fast enough, or they haven't seen examples of people going from community manager to CEO? As one of the few people I know who've done that with their career, what advice would you give to new community managers in our industry who have aspirations to higher roles?
You know, I don't know if I've ever been asked that or thought of myself as somebody who's gone from community manager to CEO, but I certainly have. And I would say that I have been in the same industry for 25 years. I do not feel like I have been in the same industry for 25 years. I have held 100 different positions. There have been 100 different movements. We've gone from the spec suite business to the hospitality business to the office leasing business to co-work, like membership based. There's so many, and the growth potential of this industry is so enormous that if people like the industry and they like people and they want to be in a hospitality driven industry that has a lot of growth, this is the industry for them. Sit tight, learn the community manager role. I think it's the most important role in the entire business. I really do. And you will see how far it can take you, because it really can. It absolutely can.
Love that.
So stay in the industry. We want you all here.
We do, and it's a lot better hours than hotels or restaurants. So we want those great people to come into the industry for sure and stay here. If you are listening in and you're like, hey, I'd consider a job in co-working, head over to thisweekincoworking.com. We have job listings there from the operators.
That's awesome.
What else? So definitely go in and check and find that right role, interview people, go to the events and meet people. There is so much you can do in this industry. And I'm saying that as someone who landed up launching spaces, then advised spaces, then built tech for spaces. Now I get to talk to the most amazing people in our industry. So it's just great. And I want as many of people who are unhappy in their hospitality roles to come and see what it's like running communities like yours. So Sarah, with that, on that positive note, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you. We're besties now, Hector. You're not going to get rid of me.
Sounds good to me. And I'm 100% sure you'll be on the podcast again in the first quarter. So this is not goodbye. This is until I see you again.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.